So I want to talk and start today with our purpose for this particular webinar. And so the purpose we got is threefold. So the first is here at the agency and the ELA team, we want to improve communication and understanding of the standards. That is what our job is, and that is what most of our work centers around is the standards, understanding the standards, and how to better communicate those standards to the field. The second purpose we have today is we want to utilize the cross-check method as a way to look at the indicators with precision. It is with that precision and intentionality in the application process of the standards that we're going to see the change that we are hoping to see in our student performance with the adoption of our new standards for next school year. And then we want to use the cross-check method as a natural process that can be applied to any quality instructional material. So this resource is a tool that's meant to be used to kind of help you as educators or you as coaches when you're coaching into your teachers or even district officials as you're working with your district staff. This method is really designed to help us get to the intention and the rigor of the indicator so that we can instruct to that. Help define our success criteria for this session. And so the first piece of criteria that we have is to explore the cross-check method as a checks and balance system for instructional planning. This is just a tool, a resource that helps us as educators really check ourselves and balance our instructional planning with the indicator and the intent and the rigor of the indicator to ensure that what we are teaching is actually what the expectation is for student learning. The next success criteria is that we want to be able to apply the cross-check method to an application of reading indicator in order to practice this method with fidelity. So this is just like anything else that we want to learn to use and it become automatic. The more you do it, the quicker and easier it will become to use it and the more like just natural the process will become. So we want to really kind of dig in and explore that today so that hopefully as we go forward and you use this tool a little more, you'll just automatically look at an instructional material and be able to gauge how valuable that material is according to some success criteria you have in this method. Okay, so just a quick plug. We do have upcoming webinars. The spring is full of opportunities for professional learning. Of course, today we're looking at an elementary level example with the cross-check method and the applications of reading. On March the 11th, you will have the opportunity to explore the cross-check method and the research strand with a middle level example. And on March 18th, the opportunity for cross-check method and communications with a high school example will be available. So just kind of plugging our upcoming immediate webinars. Okay, some housekeeping. So first off, we want to do a little bit of introduction. So first, we just want to introduce the ELA team. So I am Tabitha Hughes, and I'm the middle level education associate at the Department of Education in the Office of Assessment and Standards and on the standards side. I also have with me today Mandy Hawker. She's the elementary education associate. Brenna McCormick, she is the high school education associate. And Casey Prince Harvey, she is the humanities education associate and ELA support. She's got a lengthy one, but we all are in the standards part of the office. And so we're all here to assess, or not assess, excuse me. We're all here to support you in the field in the standards. So now there's some introductions from y'all. If you would just drop in the chat your name, the district you're from, and your role in the district, we would love to just see who's here, and maybe you'll be able to make a contact with another person that's in a similar role to just kind of build that network. So just take a minute or so to drop your name in, and as we continue talking, and we'll have that to talk throughout the rest of the time. Okay, we have a digital note catcher that is going to be dropped into the chat, so you can pull that up. It's a place to capture your thoughts and so forth. So that is available to you if you so choose to use it. It's not a requirement. And then finally, we do have an attendance link that is going to be dropped in. We would love you to take a moment just to simply fill that out. That helps us at the department to, gather data on who's attending our webinars, our audience, and just kind of helps us to tailor upcoming professional developments and so forth based on roles, district need, and so forth. So if you will take a quick moment as we continue to progress to do that attendance link, we would very much appreciate it. Okay, so our agenda for today is jam-packed. The first thing that we are going to do is engage in looking at an overview of the applications of reading. Many of you may already be familiar with this or have seen it before, but just in an effort to keep things consistent, we're going to do a very quick overview. Then we will Then we will enter into the cross-check method. I don't know why it's doing that. And then we will go into clarity and closure. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so first we're going to look at the applications of reading. All right, so when we look at the applications of reading, it is important to note that in the new 2023 standards, the applications of reading are really where our comprehension and vocabulary from the 2015 standards live. So it's really taking what RL and what RI are in the 2015 standards and merging them into one new standard with our strands and so forth. So the applications of reading is where our comprehension and our vocabulary live for the new standards. Okay, so the application of reading is comprised of the following components: literary elements and figurative language, theme and central idea, point of view and perspective in literary texts, perspective and purpose in informational texts, text structures and features, summarizing and paraphrasing, vocabulary determining meaning, vocabulary when we talk about word meanings, and then vocabulary with morphology, and then print and non-print forms. Okay, so when we think about that, notice a lot of people have said, well, where's inference? Are we not inferring anymore? We are, but if you have joined our previous webinars on the overarching expectations, things like inference are a part now of just the way we do business in ELA and other content areas. It's just the part of the skills and the process. Okay, so let's take a look at the standards map. This, of course, you can find in our standards document. But we just pulled a snapshot out so that you could see it just for this particular standard. So you see that here we have the applications of reading. This is our standard. We have 10 strands within that particular standard, and we've already listed those. Okay, then we see the components of each of these strands, our indicators and so forth. We see our grade bands, K through E4. This just means they're applicable throughout the whole trajectory of a students' learning path from kindergarten to English 4. And then this is just the coding. So you see how they're coded. AOR 1.1, AOR 1.2, so forth. So that just shows you very at a quick glance the coding of these particular strands. Okay, so we want to offer you just some very quick findings from us here at the agency. Obviously, 10 standards, 14 indicators. AOR 1.1 encompasses plot, setting, and characters. So that's a little bit of somewhat of a little bit of change between the two standards, 2015 and 2023. Point of view, purpose, and perspective are different from 2015 standards and more clearly articulated. So some of that confusion around how we see them sometimes used interchangeably now is eliminated with the 2023 standards because they are clearly defined and more clearly articulated. Figurative language appears in AOR 1.2 and figures of speech appears in AOR 8.1. And that's just to show kind of the commonalities between those two particular items within ELA, thinking about figurative language being excuse me, things like similes, metaphors, and so forth, and your figures of speech, coming into that understanding of the AOR and the interpretation of comprehension and so forth. But those are to show the commonalities, again, coming and merging together. And then, of course, our vocabulary standards are 7.1, 8.1, and 9.1 in the new standards. Okay, so we wanted to draw attention to the ELA crosswalk because we think this is a very valuable document for teachers especially to have when they begin to look at making that shift, that crossover from 2015 standards to 2023 standards. They're going to be able to look at this document and see where there are similarities and then see where there are things that may have been removed or things that may be completely new in the 2023 standards. So to read this document, we can look at the top, which shows the standard. So for example, this is ELA Applications of Reading 5, and that standard is to evaluate and critique how an author uses words, phrases, and text structures to craft text. So under that, we pulled a specific indicator. So 5.3. And then we look at, okay, how does this standard in 2023 match up with 2015? Okay, so we look from, in this case, looking at your screen, left to right, and we notice that there are some things in the 2015 standards that have a strike through mark through them. All that means is that particular area of the 2015 standards does not carry over to the 2023. It does not align, and therefore it was kind of removed because it does not align with our new 2023 standards. You may also encounter, when you look at the crosswalk, you may also encounter on the 2015 side something that says no indicator alignment. And that just simply means that on this side, the 2023, this is a new standard or a new, that has no correlation to 2015. So that's going to be a valuable document to use when you're thinking about planning. So from what we've just discussed, we're going to do a quick little activity called Complete the Ants. You know, we love acronyms in education. So we are dropping in the chat a digital link to the crosswalk. So we want you to annotate an AOR indicator of your choice. So just choose one. It might be one that currently, as a teacher, that you might struggle with or that you absolutely love and you want to see how it, matches up. But choose one of your choice. Then notice the important shifts in indicator language between the two sets of standards, 2015 and 2023. And then in about 4 minutes, we're going to have you treat a colleague to an explanation of your findings in the chat. So annotate an AOR indicator of your choice, make a notation of something that you would like to share and that you'll be able to treat a colleague to. And so you have about 4 minutes starting now. Okay, we're at the 1 minute mark. Okay, so go ahead, don't do anything yet, but go ahead and think about what you want to share with your colleagues. And go ahead and type that into the chat box because in just a couple of seconds or so, I'm going to give you the signal. And at the same time, we're going to do something called a waterfall, which means when I say go, you'll hit your response and the responses will just begin to waterfall and populate the chat. So that's why I'm giving you a couple of seconds to go ahead and get ready. So think about what little treat you want to tell your colleagues about what you noticed or something that stood out when you did this annotation, and get prepared to drop that into the waterfall. Okay, on the count of three, I want you to drop your responses, and either Brenna or KPH will share with us some of your comments. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, drop your comments and let's watch them waterfall. Okay, so what are we noticing, guys?
Couple of things that I'm seeing so far, just how concise the language of the standards are in 2023, as well as the use of the term story elements, or key elements. Let's see. Um, Easier to understand, less complicated. AOR 5.3 condenses 3 indicators into one when looking at the crosswalk. The analysis of figurative language, higher order verbs with the new standard. So quite a few takeaways, particularly around applications of reading.
Absolutely. And those are all great noticings. The standards writers were very intentional in this round of revisions about hitting things like intentionality, developmental appropriateness, um, things being concise and easily readable and understandable. So you hit on all of those points. The standards are a very concise document now and are meant to eliminate some of the confusion around verbiage and multiple tasks or multiple verbiages and context within one standard. So great noticings. Our findings, particularly with one specific AOR indicator, is around ELA 4 AOR 1.1. This was chosen because this is going to be the example that we use later on in this presentation. So what we see is we have our standard explain how setting and conflict cause characters to change and how conflict contributes to plot development. Well, one of the major noticings that we have around this is this particular indicator appears in second grade in the 2015 standards, whereas now it has moved to a fourth grade level. Again, because the indicator language and task is aligned with developmental readiness and the new 2023 ELA standards. So again, as we said, mentioning intentionality and then what is cognitively um, developmentally appropriate for our students at different age levels. Okay, so moving on. Here's a quick stop and jot. You don't have to share it, but it's something just to kind of collect your thoughts and gather around the application of readings. So if we think about the application of reading standards and indicators, if they are taught with fidelity, according to the designated South Carolina Department of Education crosswalk, according to our standards, what should student literacy performance look like in 20 years? In a perfect world, what could it look like? And then what will it take to commit to the necessary instructional changes needed to achieve this 20-year end goal? So just think about those overarching questions as we continue through the presentation and as we continue to think about shifts that we have to make in instruction and pedagogy possibly, but how we think about this strand and its long-term impact and effect. Okay, so that now completes our overview, and we're going to move into the cross-check method, which was one of our success criteria from earlier. Okay, so let's look at this particular explanation. I want you to take a couple of minutes to read this explanation, and then I want you to think about and drop in the chat which words draw your attention. What immediately captures your focus in this explanation? And just drop that word or two in the chat.
Tabitha, we're seeing a lot of people use the word intentional. I see rigor, success criteria, thoughtfully consider, aligned.
And all of those words are so important to the overall puzzle and the overall trajectory of our students' path on that way to the profile of a South Carolina graduate. We say in the ELA office that one of our favorite words is intentional, because we notice our standards are very intentionally written. The indicator language used is very intentional. The developmental progression is very intentional. So if we align our instruction, our questioning, our tasks, our DOK levels and rigor with intentionality, and using this particular method when and if needed, we should see all those pieces of the puzzle come into alignment and fit so that our students are able to navigate their K through 12 educational journey with success upon graduation. So, as I said earlier, we in education love a good acronym. And so the cross check method, the cross is actually an acronym. And so we're going to break it down very specifically about what each letter means. And then we're going to delve a little deeper into what it looks like or could look like in instruction. So the letter C represents content and skills. The level R represents rigor and questioning. The letter O represents objectives. The first S represents success criteria and assessment. Then we have the second S, that is a sequence of mini lessons. And then finally, we have the actual check, which is basically more for us as teachers to go back and to check for alignment and reflect. So that's kind of that final piece of checking for alignment before we teach, and then reflection after we teach to see if there are things that we need to tweak or to make better or to keep. So pause and ponder. What do you think is the most important step and why? And how does this align with how you already plan? So think about this for just, 30 seconds, a minute, and I would love to have two people unmute and share their answer to one of these questions, or just share something that they're connecting with. So don't be shy. What do you think is the most important step and why, or how does it align, or something you want to share of a connection to people?
We did get some responses in the chat. Tap the success criteria and assessment and rigor and success criteria both.
Oh, okay. Yes. Rigor and questioning, rigor and success criteria. Absolutely. Okay. All right. So think about this cross-check method as kind of like three separate pieces of one plan. So we start with a destination in mind. So our destination is going to be comprised of our content and skills, our rigor and questioning, our objectives, and our success criteria and assessment. So that's our destination when we think about our planning purposes. The map to get to that destination is the sequence of mini lessons. That's where we have to think, okay, I've got this unit or this lesson that I need to teach, and these are the things that I have to have in the destination. So how am I going to get there? Well, I'm going to use my lessons, ever how many that may take. And that's the caveat. An instructional series can include as few or as many lessons as needed to convey the content, to, address the skills, the rigor of the selected indicator. So it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a Monday through Friday thing. Sometimes that's how we get used to planning, especially at the elementary level, a Monday through Friday thing. But it doesn't have to be that way. Your sequence of mini lessons is just your map to get you to your destination in an approximated time that you think it's going to take to get there. And then again, you have that check and reflect. So the check for alignment is after the development of your instructional series. So after you've sat, you've planned out your sequence of mini lessons, you have your destination in mind and your roadmap to get there. Then you look back and you check, okay, does it align with indicator language? Does it align with the rigor and the DOK of the intent of the standard and the indicator? Does it align with the success criteria and so forth? And then finally, it's the reflection piece, and that's done after you have completed the instructional series or the lesson or both. And that's just a place where you can reflect on things that worked in that lesson that you would definitely repeat, things that might need to, be changed or tweaked, but it's just a place for you to capture your notes. Okay. So then we go into an example. Now, again, this is an elementary example, but you will have a middle and a high school level example coming in subsequent webinars. So for this particular example, it's ELA AOR 1 standard. That's the end goal for a student who graduates, to evaluate and critique key literary elements that enhance and deepen meaning within and across texts. But I am a fourth grade teacher, so I am going to be focusing on the indicator because that's what I instruct in my classroom. I instruct indicators because that's the piece that my students have to have mastered when they leave me so that in the next level they are successful and that building can be completely built on a strong foundation with a strong structure. So ELA 4 AOR 1.1 says to explain how setting and conflict cause characters to change, and also how conflicts contribute to plot development. Now, let me give you a little caveat here. You don't have to teach all of one indicator in one setting. That's the beauty of our choice and of this method. I can go back and decide, you know what? I'm just going to focus on the character change in this particular lesson or this particular series. And that is quite okay to do, which is what I have done in this example. So I'm going to start with my C. I'm going to look at the content and the skills. First of all, what do my students have to know how to do? What are they expected to learn? Then I'm going to think about content, so the nouns, and the skills, the verbs that are included in that indicator. And I'm going to break those apart. So for my content, they've got to know setting, conflict, character, plot. And in skills, they have to explain, they have to change. Notice that you have red arrows on this slide that have glossary definition. So I want to draw your attention now to the wonderful resource we have on our instructional landings page, which is our glossary. And what's wonderful about this is that it is a unique glossary to the state of South Carolina. This is not a dictionary.com glossary where you look up setting and you get a random definition. This is a glossary that was designed to match and correlate with the indicator intent and language of our South Carolina standards. So that was very intentional and very purposeful. Okay. Why do you think that was done that way? Why didn't we just pull any old definition of analyze or any old definition of plot? Why was it done to the specificity that it was done in our glossary? Would someone like to unmute, or you can drop it in the chat if you're shy?
I think it was done so that every student in South Carolina has the same language throughout.
Absolutely, you're correct. Because again, if we want equity and an equitable learning experience for every student in South Carolina, then our expectations of the language that they're learning in terms of academic vocabulary should be the same. So that means if a student who's living in Charleston decides, their family moves to Greenville, well, they're going to get the same understanding of what the word analyze means as any other student in South Carolina. And more importantly, within the same school. My classroom, I might have been instructing what analyze means based on my own interpretation, but my teacher down the hall is doing the same thing, and they're not the same definitions. So now we've eliminated that. The academic language is the same based on the intent of our standards so that all students have an equitable experience. So then we go to the R, rigor and questioning. So when we think about the rigor, we have to think about what is the expectation of the rigor of the indicator. And in that same vein, when we think about rigor, we have to think of the DOK level, understanding that DOK level is not verb synonymous. We can write tasks using the word, for example, analyze at all 4 levels. I can have a level 1 DOK question with analyze. So it's not verb dependent. It is task and cognitive complexity dependent. We do have a support for DOK that you can see and click as well when you get this resource. So we have to think about what is the cognitive thinking and the cognitive demand of the indicator. What do my students have to be able to do cognitively to successfully show mastery of my 4th grade indicator by the time they leave me? So then when I'm thinking about questioning, I need to think, what are my overarching text-dependent questions? I want to use these as a guide or as a goal for my students to reach. Okay. What are some collaborative questions that I might want to create that could allow access and entry for all of my students, no matter what their level? And does the question of my text-dependent question and my collaborative discussion questions, are they mirroring the expectation of the indicator? So for this particular indicator, this is a DOK3 indicator because students are expected to explain how setting and conflict cause character change, but then they're also expected to explain how conflict contributes to plot development. So that requires quite a lot of heavy duty lifting for a student. They have to first off know and understand what these words mean: setting, conflict, characters, plot development. But then they have to think about, within the confines of a text, reading that text, disseminating the information from that text, integrating these meanings into the task, and then being able to explain it. So it's a fairly rigorous expectation or student expectation for fulfilling the demands of this indicator. From there, we want to think about and take a moment to pause and think about questioning. Now, when we look at this is actual data from South Carolina Teaching Standards 4.0. All of you, if you're teachers, you've been evaluated using this, and you know that you have indicators which you have to, be evaluated upon. And what we noticed is that questioning is one of the highest areas with which our teachers struggle. Not because they're not asking questions. Lord knows we ask plenty of questions as educators when we're in the classroom, but it's the types of questions that we're asking. Are we asking those rigorous questions and those DOK higher level type questions that are encouraging the cognitive demand and the critical thinking that students need in order to not only master our grade level indicators, but to continue on the trajectory of mastering the overall standard by graduation? So if we want to think about questioning to encourage critical thinking, let's look at how we can do that, but also provide some scaffolded support. We know that in a perfect world, all of our children would be on grade level when they came. They would all be reading complex text. They could all answer any rigorous question we give them, but that is utopia. And We have not found that yet. So let's think about how do we scaffold students into that utopian expectation? Well, we can start that with collaborative discussion questions. Well, what are those? Well, they guide students to engage in conversations about a text. A lot of times they could be questions that we ask our students if we're doing a shared reading experience. But a lot of times they're questions that we would like them to be able to answer in a discussion with their peers about text. They allow for ideas to be presented, defended, elaborated upon, and responded to, again, with the goal of collaboration in mind. So these are some kind of examples. So look at what you notice about these. What is your first reaction? What do you think are the most important details and why? What does the text help you think about? How is your understanding of the text like the others in your group? Does anything stand out about these kinds of questions, these collaborative questions to you? Thinking about your students using them. Please feel free to drop in the chat, or you can unmute and share. What do you notice about them?
In the
Hi.
chat, we have that they're open-ended, not yes or no. They're non-threatening.
I love that. Non-threatening, yes. Non-threatening because everybody has an opinion. Any student that you put in a group or a partnership can have an opinion about one of these questions or all of these questions and can then engage in the conversation. So they don't have to feel like, oh, I don't know the answer, so I'm going to stay quiet, or I'm going to let somebody else do the work. They can participate. Everybody can have a first reaction. Everybody can think something is important. So these are those scaffolded questions that allow access for all students to discuss text. And that's really what we want. We want those discussions. So we give them that scaffold with the intent of knowing that we're leading them to the text-dependent question. Those questions require students to provide evidence directly from the text in their answer, but these questions, the language is going to be directly aligned to the indicators. So this is where you're going to see those more challenging questions like, how does the author's choice of words shape the tone of the text? Okay, so that's a very academic type question. How does the author's use of personification impact the meaning? How does the setting impact the conflict? So you can see the language of the indicators present in the text-dependent questions. And giving a student that kind of question right out of the gate, some of your kids will be able to answer that. But the majority of them are probably not necessarily going to be able to do it or not going to feel like they can do it. And so collaborative discussion questions does two things. One, it allows them entry into the group, to the conversation, but it also helps them name what they're already doing. A lot of our students are doing the things, the tasks, but they don't know that's what they're doing. We have to give them the language. We have to show them that, hey, you just discussed how the author's choice of words shape the tone of the text. You didn't know that's what you were doing, but that is what you were doing. Okay, so then how do we bridge the gap between those collaborative conversations that we want all of our students to engage in, and then to get them to answering those text-dependent questions that we know they have got to be able to do? Well, we do that with an intentional indicator-aligned plan for scaffolded questioning. So let's think about, how do we align our questions? Now, questioning, again, realizing that our data, our 4.0 data, shows that questioning is one of those areas that our teachers need a little more support with. So the first thing we want to think about is the indicator. Now, this is just an example. It's a 7th grade AOR 1.2 example. So here's the indicator. Analyze how figurative language impacts mood, tone, and meaning. So if we're going to write a TDQ, okay, a text-dependent question that's going to be, might be at the end of our lesson or the end of our series of lessons that we want our students to be able to answer. Well, that TDQ might look like this. How does the author's use of figurative language impact the tone of the text? Okay, so we may not take on everything. We might just focus on tone, but we need to think, okay, in this TDQ, is there language that could either be unknown to my students? Could it confuse my students? Could it give them pause? Well, yes, figurative language might give them pause, impact, tone, that academic language. So if I know this is the goal, the TDQ is the goal that answers and shows me if my students have mastered the indicator, I want to give them some CDQs to help get them scaffolded and built up. So I could ask them, how does this text make you feel? What words make you feel that way? Okay, well, that's the same thing I'm asking them about. This is mood and tone and author's word choice, but it's a non-threatening way to ask them that as they learn that that's what they're doing. They're discussing tone, they're discussing mood, they're discussing author's word choice, yet they just haven't named that yet. They don't realize it. Did your feelings change at any point in the story? What made them change? Well, that's tone and impact. Where does the author make an exaggeration? How does the exaggeration make you feel? Again, tone and figurative language. So the CDQ, again, is meant to be a support that eventually will go away, because we know that our students can't live solely in the CDQ lane. They have to transition to the text-dependent indicator language, but this gives them the tools they need, and it teaches them how to make that transition while they're learning it. Okay, so for our example, based on our 4th grade example, I'm this 4th grade teacher. I'm now going to think about, okay, based on my indicator, what are some, or what is a TDQ question that I can ask? Because I'm only going to take one part of this indicator in this particular lesson. Why did the change in setting of the story and the conflict itself cause the character to change? So remember, there is a second part of that, but I'm only focusing on this. Okay? Now, when I think about my collaborative discussion questions, I can go ahead and plan for the whole unit. So I can ask questions about, where did the story take place? Did the place ever change? How did the characters act differently when they were in the different places? I can ask, what's the problem of the story? Did the problem change the way the characters felt? Did it change the, the retelling, or excuse me, did it change, the conflict? Was there anything that the story, in the story that caused the characters to show emotion or feelings? What was it? Why did they feel that way? So these are all questions I can go ahead and plan for my unit, but I may only choose a few of those that specifically focus on my indicator to have my students discuss. Then I think about my objectives, okay? So what SMART learning objectives can be written for this indicator? Okay, what are they going to need to understand and be able to do independently when they get to that TDQ? Well, they've got to explain how the setting of a story causes the character or characters to change, and they have to be able to explain how the conflict or conflicts of the story also cause the character or characters to change. That's what they have to be able to do independently to answer my TDQ and show me that they understand and have mastery. So then I need to think about my success criteria and my assessment. I must think in terms of what is valid. What is valid success criteria that's measurable for me? I've got to write something that I can measure. What am I looking for? What show me that show that they have gotten this content? How am I going to assess the student learning and growth? Am I going to use a formative assessment or a summative assessment? Okay, and then how am I ensuring that that I'm assessing the intent and expectation of the indicator? Those are all things I need to think about in my planning phase. Okay, so for this success criteria, I want my students to read a narrative text. Now that can be an excerpt, it could be a chapter, it could be, whatever it is I need it to be. And then I want them to explain to a partner one example of how the setting of a story changed a character and the conflict of a story change the character. But for accountability purposes, I want to see their thinking. So I'm going to have them complete with their partner just a simple graphic organizer where they add, connect, and reflect. So they'll fill out, they'll answer these questions on their graphic organizer, and then they'll swap papers, and they can add something to it, they can make connections to it, or they can reflect on it. But that shows me then their thinking and how they have interacted with the objective and the expected learning. Then I need to think, okay, this is my success criteria. This is kind of, my destination. Now let me think about this map. How am I going to get them there? Well, if I'm really going to dive deeply into character change and plot development, I want to spend about 2 weeks on this unit. Okay, so this is just an example. I said this was like a third lesson in this unit. So I want to make a connection. Okay, I got to hook them. I got to activate that prior knowledge. So I might say something like, we've been reading this text and we've been discussing characters in the story, different settings in the story, conflict in the story. Today, we're going to explore how the setting and the conflict of a story, how that can cause the characters to change. And I'm going to use this flowchart model to demonstrate, to show you that, to show how the setting and the conflict of the story thus far have changed one of the characters or multiple characters. So I'm going to do my modeling. We're going to talk about it. And then I'm going to want the students to demonstrate some understanding. So they're going to work in groups to complete their own flowchart after the one that I've modeled. And they're going to have to choose a different character in the story. And they're going to show how that character has changed because of the setting and the conflict. And the beauty of this activity is this can be added to over multiple days as the story continues to unfold. And then the reflection and closure, I want them to think about, okay, they're learning for today. They're going to answer a question, how would the characters have changed if the story was different? And I'm just going to give them very simply a response board sheet. When I was in class teaching, I had them do tweets. I had a Twitter board. And so like their exit slips would be little sticky notes, and they would do a tweet of a question or a task I wanted them to do to show understanding. And this is kind of the same concept, but it's a very quick little formative way for me to see, did they capture the learning that day? Did they understand? Okay. And then after I've done all my planning, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to check for alignment. Okay. Are my steps in alignment with the chosen indicator? Okay. Do I have any reflections in the process, in this whole process? Did I make considerations for any of my special population groups? Do I have GT students? Do I have multi-language learners? Do I have SPED students? And have I accounted for that? Do I need outside resources, anchor charts, texts, graphic organizers, etc.? And so you can see the notes. I said, well, the assessment's formative. It aligns with the indicator learning, DOK expectations, language used within the lesson that I'm going to model for them, and in the formative assessment is the same as indicator language. And then here's some materials I might use. And then at the end, after I've taught, I'm going to reflect. What went well with this lesson? What did I like? What didn't? Did anything tank that I'm like, oh, we're not doing that again? Do I need to adjust anything before I do these plans again? Okay, so I just said that the flowchart modeling activity went very well, provided lots of opportunity for good discussion. But I realized when I did this that really I should have done the first flowchart completely as an I do. I'm just showing you my thought process. And then add in that second layer where we created it together, where the kids could actually help me create it and explain it before I released them to do the flowchart that they did in groups. So one caveat to this is a lot, this cross-check method. It is not something you would do it with every single indicator. Okay, if I have not said that before, let me reiterate that. This would be a method that you would use maybe on a tricky indicator, or maybe on an indicator that you love teaching and you want to make sure that now in the 2023 that your lesson plan is still aligned with that, and it's or that you may just need to adjust the rigor or the DOK. It's not something you would do with every single indicator. However, the more you use it, the better you will become at being able to look at an instructional material or a lesson plan and be able to recognize, I need to tweak that, or that is perfect. That addresses everything I need. Okay, so that was a lot. What now? All right, we've got resources. So there is a resource that's been added. I think, Brenna, you said it was a Wakelet. But these resources pertain to the cross-check method. And so we have lots of resources that you can go in and check that will help you with this process as you begin to utilize it and transition your 2015 lessons to 2023 standards. With the understanding that you don't have to get rid of everything. You don't have to start completely over. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Some things will just need to be tweaked. Some things you might say, you know what? I really don't like that. Let me just start over. But you have choices and options. And we've got the resources to help you. Also, additionally, we have a ton of support documents on the website landing page that will also be of use to you when you're using the cross-check method. Things like the crosswalk, things like the glossary, things like the vertical articulation with indicator insights. So there are a plethora of resources to help. So we've done our agenda. That brings us to clarity and closure. 3 steps forward. So thinking about when you leave this process today, you're probably going to want to take some time to explore these resources with the cross-check method. You know, what's out there? How can it help me? And then you may want to decide who could partner with you in this work. Do you team teach? You have a teacher that teaches with you. Do you plan with your grade level or your department? But who could you engage to help with this work? Because many hands makes the work lighter. And then just pick a place to start. Choose an indicator to start with and just try it. So Rome wasn't built in a day, and this is not going to become automatic in a day, but you have to start somewhere. So that brings us up to our final piece, which is the feedback survey. And we at the department and our agency and in our team take feedback very seriously. We look at it usually while you're filling it out. One of us has got it pulled up and we're looking at it. But we use the feedback and the comments and the suggestions to tweak our own work, so that when we bring professional development or sometimes information dissemination in shorter sessions, when we bring that to the field, we're bringing high quality things that can be used and put into practice, because ultimately that's what the goal is. We want the field to have materials and resources that are going to help them better serve their students, because that's why we're all here. So if you will take just a few moments to fill out that survey for us, my team and I will listen and linger for a few minutes in case you have questions or comments before the end of the webinar. But we want to thank you for taking time to attend this today. We know that all of your plates are full. They're probably running over, but you took the time to come to this, and we want to thank you and acknowledge that, you know, the loads you carry, and thank you for the work that you do on a daily basis for our students in South Carolina. So thank you.